So excited to be here because I usually sit in a soundproof studio all day and I make these podcasts where I'm just kind of trusting that someone is out there listening on the other end. So it's really a wonderful thing that tonight, it's guaranteed, I am not talking to myself. I want to introduce you to Charlie Lowell to my left. He is the keyboard player for the Grammy award-winning band Jars of Clay. He also makes music under the name Hollow Hum. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to do something. Just bear with me. Take a second and close your eyes, okay? I want you to take 3 deep breaths. In and out. Got 2 more. In and out. Last one, make it count. In and out. And I want to introduce you to a little girl.
Well, my name is Hannah, and I really like gymnastics, and I can almost do a handstand.
Hannah is 7 years old. She lives with her family in East Nashville, and she can, almost, do a handstand. Here she goes.
Take off your jacket.
Taking off her jacket. Whoa!
And I can't do a one-handed cartwheel.
Oh, are you serious?
Mm-hmm.
Hannah has had a full day, and it's time for her to go upstairs and get ready for bed. She changes into some pink pajamas, and her mom, Bonnie, tucks her in.
You ready for bed? Yawning. You tell everyone good night?
It's only, no,
It's 8:15.
16.
Okay. Did you tell everyone good night?
Mm-mm.
You want to tell Hannah good night?
Hannah's 10-year-old brother walks in the room, Matthew. He's skinny with curly hair.
Good night. Good night.
Also, can't forget the cat,
Good night, Nana.
and Hannah's dad, Josh.
Good night. Your head touched that.
Hannah's room has books, a bunch of stuffed animals, but there is one thing that sets her room apart from most 7-year-olds. What is this thing?
It's my ventilator, and it helps me breathe, because when I was 3 years old, I stopped breathing, and I had to go to the hospital.
The beginning of her story is quite dramatic.
When Hannah was a toddler, Bonnie took her and her brother Matthew on a trip to Oklahoma to visit some family.
And Saturday, we got up and went to the farmer's market, and it got up to 115 degrees that day.
Hannah was acting a little sluggish, which made sense. It was hot. Everyone felt that way. So they decided to head back to the hotel. But that night,
Went to bed and had the strangest night. All night long, she was just screaming and uncomfortable, and it was just really bizarre. And we got up the next day, and she was almost unresponsive.
Bonnie took Hannah to the ER. The doctors gave her oxygen. The next day, they tested her blood, and they found something surprising.
Her CO2 level was so high that it was nearly incompatible with life.
The doctors rushed Hannah into the ICU, having no clue why this was happening. Meanwhile, Hannah's dad, Josh, was still back in Nashville.
I think I was watching I think it may have been the 7th Harry Potter movie when I got the call from Bonnie. So I came home and rented a car and drove all night and got to Tulsa. And when I got there, I was shocked. My vibrant, happy little girl was like a shell. She was pale and her cheeks were sunken in, and she didn't look like the girl that I was used to seeing.
Hannah was in the ICU for 2 weeks, and no one gave her an official diagnosis. But there were some guesses.
So one doctor had come in overnight in Tulsa and said, really offhandedly, I will never forget this. She said, "Looks like Ondine's curse to me."
Ondine's curse comes from a fairy tale. It has many versions, but here's one. Ondine was a forest nymph. She was beautiful and immortal. One day, a man sees her walking in the woods and he falls in love immediately. The only problem is he's engaged to another woman. But he's so smitten with Ondine, he leaves his fiancée. With persistence, he woos her and they get married, which is a big deal because it means that she would give up her immortality. On their wedding day, the man vows he will declare his love for her with every waking breath. They're happy. Years pass, they have a kid, and Ondine begins to age. The man starts coming home late, night after night, sometimes not at all. And one night, worried, she goes out looking for her husband and spots him kissing his ex-fiancée. Watching them, she is outraged. She gave up immortality for this man. In her fury, she curses him. Just like she spent so many restless nights waiting for him to come home, he would get no rest either. If he ever fell asleep, he would stop breathing and die. But Ondine's curse isn't a fairy tale. It is a genetic disorder called CCHS, congenital central hypoventilation syndrome. Now, miraculously, Hannah started to get better. The doctors were stumped. She flew back to Nashville, and life got to normal for about 2 weeks, until Bonnie got a call from Hannah's pediatrician.
And said, you need to come into the office. I need to talk to you about something. And I sort of knew. So we come in, and she's got the gene results from the lab.
Hannah had a genetic mutation on her FOX2B gene. It was CCHS. When she goes to sleep, her brain stops telling her to breathe.
Oh no. This just changes everything.
CCHS, it is incredibly rare. There are only about 1,000 diagnosed cases in the world, which means a lot of doctors aren't super familiar with it, and there aren't any local support groups that Bonnie could just show up to. She needed information, so she started to research online and found this thing called the CCHS Family Network. They had a Facebook group and a sign-up on their website. So Bonnie registered, and then something improbable happened. A woman in Tennessee named Liz got an email
saying that there is a family in my area who has a child who has CCHS, and would I reach out to them?
Liz's daughter Carmen has CCHS, and there Liz is just staring at this email.
And I immediately saw their address. I was like, wait a minute, what? They live like a mile away.
Of all the gin joints, and all the towns, in all the world, Bonnie had a person who could give her some guidance, and Hannah, well, she had a new friend.
Well, I know somebody else that has CCHS, and her name is Carmen.
Like Hannah, Carmen needs a ventilator at night, but she uses a breathing tube directly in her neck.
What do you think of that, knowing Hannah and Matthew?
I think it's really cool to know somebody who knows what feelings that I feel in the condition and like what I have to do before I can go to sleep.
Anyone who's ever worn a CPAP mask, you know that it's a suffocating feeling. It's supposed to be helping you breathe, but you feel like somebody is trying to stop your breathing. And so she was just fighting us for about a month. It was heartbreaking as parents. But, we had to stay the course because that was life support. It is life support for her. And it was just, not optional.
Liz made a comment to Bonnie that she's like, you'll never sleep well again, or something along that line. I can't remember exactly what it was that she said, but it was basically like, your sleep will suffer for the rest of your life. And she was coming at it from a place that I fully understand now. And I think if you asked her again, maybe she would have softened it a little bit, but it prepared us in a way, and it scared us too, but it's been true.
I can turn it up a little bit. But that's the whoosh that I have all night.
Bonnie holds up a video monitor that she carries around when Hannah goes to bed.
So that's sort of the norm sound for me at night. It's like the waves in the beach or something.
Yeah.
You're just sort of used to it. And then when the alarm comes through here, it's pretty loud, and it wakes me up.
Sometimes Hannah moves in the middle of the night and accidentally pulls off her mask or crimps her ventilator tube with her leg, and it sets off an alarm, one that Bonnie has to constantly be listening for to avoid fatal consequences.
Our son is, a typical kid, so I know what it feels like to put him to bed and to just close the door. I feel that sense of release with him at night. I mean, if you're a couple, that's a great time. That's when you reconnect, So that is a little bit trickier because there's always that awareness. You always have to be vigilant.
Really, while Hannah's awake, I don't worry about her 75, 80% of the time. When the sun goes down and it's getting to bedtime, then no, there's not a time when we're not aware, if not, worrying.
So this is what it sounds like when the air is just blowing through, and when it meets some resistance, it starts actually giving breaths. So we're gonna put on her mask now. You sit up.
It's bedtime again, and Hannah is in her pink pajamas.
Do you want to say anything to him with your mask on?
I don't know.
What'd you have for breakfast again?
Waffle and sausage.
Waffles and sausage.
Is this ever like scary, or is it?
It's not that scary since it's normal to me. And I've been doing it for a couple of years.
Almanzo drove slowly as he told Laura of the 80-acre field of wheat he had sown and the 30 acres of oats.
Bonnie reads to Hannah while she falls asleep. Right now, they're going through the Little House on the Prairie books. They're on these happy golden years. It's the one where Laura and Almanzo get married. When Josh and Bonnie had their first kid, they decided they were going to be free-range parents. Let Matthew ride his bike a certain distance from the house, walk to school, scrape up his knees. But then things changed. I asked Josh what kind of emotions he felt about this reality.
Yeah, it's not joy. It's certainly not joy, and it's not sadness. I mean, we don't mourn for what we have or what we might have had. For me, it's anger. I mean, I'm angry that this little 6-year-old kid has to deal with this. I can remember this feeling once we got the genetic test back. It's really rare that you just have this mutation that comes out of nowhere. But once you have it, you have a 50% chance of passing it on to your own kids. And when that realization came to me that, oh, she's gonna have to decide whether she wants to have kids and to pass this on to her own kids, it broke my heart. And that still really upsets me that she's gonna have that decision. But it's different now that we've lived with it for 4 years, 5 years. Once the uncertainty is over and once you sort of get into a groove, it's not so terrible. It's not normal. It'll never feel normal, but it's her life. It's the life that we know now.
Jesus, as me the Son for the...
After reading, Bonnie sings Hannah a few songs as she falls asleep. Obviously, I was sitting there recording this, but it was an incredibly intimate moment between a mother and a daughter. I found myself focusing on my breath and thinking, it's pretty remarkable that I have the confidence that I'll go unconscious at night and wake up the next day just fine. But seeing this little girl fog up a ventilator mask as she drifted off, I couldn't help but be in awe of every breath. Every one I take, Hannah takes, all of us. Go ahead, breathe in. I know I don't stop and do it enough. We are alive, and every breath is precious.